So Nintendo's online expansion service has been available for over a month at this point, and let me be frank for a second, it's obviously not a great service, and I even picked it to pieces on my personal channel. But with that being said, I have realized some of my misconceptions about the service since its initial launch in late October, and some of the issues with the service aren't quite as awful as I first thought, after I found out ways to circumvent them. First off, let's go over the list of prominent complaints about the Nintendo 64 on the Switch. There's been a ton of complaints concerning the emulation. One of those issues are the textures, like the less detailed appearance of water, which becomes more apparent in the water temple on Ocarina of Time, and even some issues with fog textures as well. I gotta be honest, when I first played the Nintendo 64 on the Switch, I didn't really notice the lacking aesthetics. That's not to say that they're not there, because they're definitely noticeable by everyone in a photo-by-photo comparison. Some aspects do actually look better than ever though, as the colors are enhanced and the graphics overall have a crisper, cleaner look, which has bothered many purists, but for myself personally, I grew up playing the Nintendo 64 in the 90s, and these enhanced colors only affect my experience in a positive way. There's the basic lineup of games immediately available, and Nintendo has already given us a heads up on the second batch of games that will eventually be available. This type of slow leak has bothered many customers, especially when you consider the immediate and significant price increase on the online service. Making a substantial amount of the 64's library immediately available feels like the least they could do, considering the file size and how the games are nearly 3 decades old at this point. There's also the lack of the rewind feature, which through the online service is available on the NES, the SNES, and the Sega Genesis. But to be honest, I don't see this as a negative thing, as I absolutely hate the rewind feature due to the way it makes the games too easy and significantly cheapens the experience as a result. Again, this is one of those aspects that you may or may not see as an issue, all depending on your personal preference. One of the most exciting things about the Nintendo 64 games on the Switch is how it makes it possible to finally enjoy online multiplayer with your friends and family. But one of the most frustrating things about it is its poor execution. Although it's awesome to play online with my brother after 25 years of enjoying the games, it would also be nice if it wasn't constantly lagging and periodically kicking us from the game altogether. You see, unlike the Xbox and PlayStation, Nintendo's online service isn't reliant on their own servers, but instead on a player-to-player connection, which unfortunately means that if just one person in the group has a crappy internet connection, then the entire group suffers for it. Needless to say, this has ruined numerous races and tennis rallies. Now again, mostly all of these details suck, but there's a couple aspects that might not be quite as bad as you initially thought. So for one, paying $50 for a specific controller just so you can play very old emulated games seems pretty steep for some of us, and I for one am not willing to purchase the controller at that price. So for now, it's just the Pro controller for me. Now for those of us not using the N64 controller, a common complaint has been the button mechanics and the lack of customization with the button configuration. For example, on Star Fox 64, in order to do a barrel roll to the right, you need to press the R button, but to do a barrel roll to the left, you need to press the ZL button. The fact that the buttons aren't in line with one another is extremely confusing when you're in the heat of battle, and was causing me to get unnecessarily damaged. Why it isn't simply the L and R buttons or the ZL and ZR buttons is beyond me. The button locations of the laser beams and bombs also feel out of place compared to the traditional controller. There have been many articles and videos made online expressing similar frustrations. Now, although this is a legitimate criticism, and a button configuration option should be available within the Nintendo 64 app, it still doesn't totally ruin the experience as much as some people initially thought, because there is actually a button configuration option through the Nintendo Switch settings itself. If you follow these instructions, you'll find the location for changing the button mapping, but this does it for every game you play, so you might want to create some specific presets for specific games. This means you'll have to frequently go in and out of these settings each time you play Nintendo 64 games. Is it extremely inconvenient? Absolutely, but at least it means I can play Nintendo 64 games comfortably if I'm willing to take a couple extra steps. Now collectively, the biggest complaint of the gaming community is easily the price of the online expansion, and for good reason. More than doubling the price for simply adding some Nintendo 64 games was a jarring slap to the face for many Nintendo fans. Yes, it does include the Animal Crossing DLC at no additional cost, but roughly only 1/3 of Nintendo Switch owners actually have Animal Crossing New Horizons, which means that 2/3 of Switch owners are being given a terrible offer where not everything within it is applicable. No matter how you slice it, this is an incredibly lame move from Nintendo. But the silver lining here actually resides within the family plan. Usually, regardless of what technological service you're using, family plans typically have some sort of location restrictions or are only applicable to people within a specific IP address. But this is actually not the case with Nintendo's online family plan, and many people are not aware of this. On your family plan, 8 people with Nintendo accounts can be on the same plan regardless of their locations. That means that if you're organized about it, you can get a group of 8 random people on the same plan, have each person chip in with their $10 through Venmo or some kind of payment app, and you're golden. That's $10 per person per year, which is extremely doable. That's the route I went, and now I'm actually paying half of what I was before the expansion when I only had the solo service. Now the point of this video isn't to convince you that Nintendo's online service isn't awful, or that Nintendo's business practices aren't terrible, because I very much still believe they are. But the point of this video is that if you're someone like me who really wanted to get the Nintendo 64 games on the Switch, there is some ways to minimize the amount of frustration that comes with it, and I thought it would be good to share those. Paying only $10 a year, and with the other details I mentioned, I still find myself being able to enjoy the Nintendo 64 games on the Switch, regardless of their many shortcomings. So what do you guys think? Do you have the expansion online service? And if not, what would Nintendo have to do to make you consider it? Let us know in the comments section below. Thanks for watching everyone, my name is Johnny and I'll be consistently providing mostly Nintendo related content, so make sure to like and subscribe if you're interested in hearing more.